You did not land here by chance. This moment found you, because something deep inside you is searching for truth and answers. And what you are about to hear will shake something within you and awaken a power you almost forgot you had. There was a time when everything felt normal, when trust felt real, and when the people around you seemed genuine and loyal, but that illusion shattered in ways you never expected. They smiled in your presence and spoke poison behind your back, building a narrative designed to break you slowly and quietly without you even realizing what was happening. You felt the shift when conversations became colder, when energy changed, and when eyes that once held warmth began to carry hidden intentions. What hurt the most was not just what they did, but how they twisted everything to make you look like the problem while they stood there pretending to be innocent. You tried to understand, you tried to fix things, you tried to hold on to what was real, but the deeper you looked, the more you realized this was never about truth. This was about control. They wanted your light dimmed, your voice silenced, and your presence erased because your existence reminded them of something they could never become. Every whisper, every lie, every calculated move was designed to isolate you and make you question yourself until you forgot who you truly were. But here is something they never understood, and something they could never predict. Your strength was never dependent on their approval, and your truth was never defined by their lies, and what you are about to uncover next will make you realize why everything had to happen exactly the way it did. You started noticing the patterns, the repeated behavior, the same tactics used in different situations, as if everything was part of a carefully crafted plan. They planted seeds of doubt in others' minds, turning people against you slowly and methodically, while keeping their own image clean and untouched. They knew exactly what they were doing. Every word they spoke carried intention, every action had a hidden purpose, and every step was calculated. It was never random, it was never accidental. It was a strategy built on manipulation, deception, and fear. They created stories that painted you as someone you were not, hoping that if enough people believed it, then it would become your reality. And for a moment it felt like they were winning, because people began to look at you differently, and the weight of false judgment started to press down on you. You questioned yourself, wondering if maybe you had done something wrong, wondering if somehow you deserved what was happening. But deep inside, there was a voice that refused to be silenced, a voice that kept reminding you that something was not right. That voice was your truth, fighting to survive in a storm of deception and confusion. And what happened next is where everything begins to shift in ways they never saw coming. There were nights when silence felt louder than any noise, when your thoughts raced and your heart felt heavy with unanswered questions. You replayed moments again and again, trying to understand how everything changed so quickly and why the people you trusted became the source of your pain. It felt like you were standing alone in a storm, watching everything you built being torn apart, while no one seemed to notice or care. But what you could not see in that moment was that something greater was happening behind the scenes, something beyond human understanding. Every challenge, betrayal, every moment of isolation was shaping you, strengthening you, and preparing you for something far greater than you. Imagine they thought they were breaking you, but in reality they were refining you, turning your pain into power and your confusion into clarity. What they intended as destruction became transformation, and what they planned as your downfall became the foundation of your rise. You began to see things differently, to understand people more deeply, and to recognize truths that were once hidden from you. Your awareness expanded, and with it came a realization that changed everything. And just when you thought you had seen the worst of it, something even more revealing began to unfold. They could not keep up the act forever, because truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply it is buried. Cracks began to show in their stories, inconsistencies started to appear, and the same people who once believed them began to question everything. The energy shifted again, but this time in your favor, as the illusion they created slowly started to collapse. People began to notice the patterns, the contradictions, and the hidden motives behind their actions. The same lies that once worked for them started working against them, exposing their true nature for everyone to see. And suddenly the roles began to reverse, as those who once stood confidently behind their false image started to feel the pressure of truth closing in. They became defensive, restless, and desperate, trying to hold on to a story that was no longer believable. What they built on deception could not survive in the presence of truth, and the more they tried to fix it, the worse it became. You watched from a distance, no longer needing to defend yourself, because reality was speaking louder than anything you could say, and just when it seemed like things could not turn any further, the situation reached a point no one could ignore. There is a moment in every story where everything changes, where the truth becomes undeniable, and where masks can no longer be worn. This was that moment for you and for them, as everything they tried to hide started coming into the light. The same people who once doubted you began to see you differently. Not because you explained yourself, but because the truth revealed itself, and while they struggled to maintain control, you stood stronger, calmer, and more grounded than ever before. You realized that you never needed to fight back, because what is real does not require constant defense. Their actions spoke for themselves, and their downfall was not something you created, but something they caused through their own choices. The weight of their deception became too heavy to carry, and it began to show in every aspect of their lives. Meanwhile, you started to feel lighter, freer, and more aligned with who you truly are. What once felt like loss now felt like release, and what once felt like pain now felt like growth. And what comes next will make you understand why none of this was ever meant to destroy you, but to elevate you. What you thought was the end of your strength was actually the beginning of a version of you that they could never touch or influence again. There was a shift within you that no one else could see, but you could feel it in the way you carried yourself, in the way you responded, and in the way you no longer reacted to things that once drained your energy. You stopped explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you, and you stopped seeking validation from those who never intended to give it. Something inside you became still yet powerful, like a quiet force that no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. They noticed this change, even if they could not fully understand it, because your silence spoke louder than any defense. You could have made the same presence they once tried to weaken, now felt untouchable and distant, as if you had stepped into a space they could not enter. You were no longer playing the same game, because you finally understood the rules and chose to walk away from it completely. This was not defeat, this was evolution. This was the moment you stopped being who they thought you were and became who you were always meant to be. And just when they thought they still had control, they realized something had slipped beyond their reach forever. What happened next forced them to confront a reality they had been avoiding for far too long. They started to feel the consequences, not all at once, but slowly, like a shadow following them wherever they went. Same tactics they used against you began to reflect back into their own lives, creating confusion, instability, and unrest. Relationships around them started to weaken, trust began to fade, and the same doubts they planted in others started to grow. Within themselves, they could not escape the energy they created, because it surrounded them in every direction, leaving them with nowhere to hide. Every decision they made seemed to lead to another problem, as if something unseen was blocking their path forward. They tried to distract themselves, to ignore what was happening, but the weight of their actions kept pulling them back into awareness. Even in moments of silence, their thoughts became louder, reminding them of everything they had done and everything they tried to hide. The peace they once pretended to have was replaced by restlessness and unease that could not be shaken. They realized too late that what they sent out had returned not as punishment, but as a reflection of their own choices. And as this realization deepened, something inside them began to break in ways they could not control. You, on the other hand, began to rise in ways that felt almost unreal at first, but slowly became your new reality. Opportunities started appearing, connections felt more genuine, and your path became clearer with every step you took forward. It was as if something was guiding you, protecting you, and aligning everything in your favor without you having to force anything. The same doors that once seemed closed began to open effortlessly, and the resistance you once faced started to disappear. People who truly saw your value began to enter your life, bringing support, understanding, and respect that you had been missing. You started to trust yourself again, to believe in your decisions, and to move with confidence that came from within. The version of you that once doubted everything was replaced by someone who understood their worth and refused to settle for less. You were no longer carrying the weight of what they did, because you realized it was never yours to carry in the first place. What they tried to take from you was restored in ways greater than you imagined, and what they tried to destroy became your strength And just when everything seemed to be aligning perfectly, something even more powerful began to unfold. They began to watch you, not openly, but from a distance, observing your growth and trying to understand how you managed to move forward without them. It confused them because they expected you to fall apart, to struggle, and to remain stuck in the situation they created, but instead they saw you becoming stronger, more focused, and more at peace than ever before. This was something they could not comprehend because it went against everything they believed would happen. Their attempts to break you had only revealed your resilience, and their efforts to control you had only set you free. The same person they underestimated was now standing in a position they could not reach or influence, and with every step you took forward, it became more clear that they had lost something they could never get back. Regret began to settle in, not just for what they did, but for what they lost in the process. They started to see your value too late, realizing that what they tried to destroy was something rare and irreplaceable, and as this truth became impossible to ignore, their internal struggle grew stronger with each passing moment. There is a kind of silence that comes when everything becomes clear. There is nothing left to question and nothing left to prove. You reached that point where your peace was no longer dependent on circumstances or people, but rooted within you. You understood that not every battle is meant to be fought, and not every truth needs to be explained. Your growth was no longer about reacting, but about choosing what deserves your energy and what does not. You began to move differently, to think differently, and to see the world through a perspective that could not be shaken. The pain that once felt overwhelming became a lesson that shaped you into someone unbreakable. You no longer feared betrayal because you trusted your ability to walk away and rebuild stronger than before. The past no longer held power over you because you had taken back control of your story, and in that moment you realized something that changed everything forever. What comes next will show you why your journey was never about them, but always about who you were becoming. There comes a point where everything that once confused you suddenly makes sense, where every moment of pain reveals its purpose, and every loss shows you what it was protecting you from. You reached that point not by chance, but through everything. You endured every betrayal, every lie, every attempt to break you led you here. You are no longer the same person who once questioned their worth or doubted their path, because now you see clearly. You see that what happened was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to separate you from what could not grow with you. They were never part of your final chapter. They were only a lesson that taught you how to recognize truth and how to walk away from illusion. The more you reflect, the more you realize that every step forward required you to let go of something that was holding you back, and even though it hurt at the time, it created space for something real, something aligned, and something meant for you. You no longer feel anger the way you once did. You understand that holding on to it would only keep you tied to a past that no longer defines you. Your focus has shifted. Your energy has changed, and your direction is now guided by clarity rather than confusion. And just when you think the journey is complete, you discover a deeper level of purpose waiting for you. They are still where you left them, caught in cycles they created, unable to move forward because they refused to face themselves. The same patterns repeat in their lives, different faces, different situations, but the same outcomes over and over again. They look for someone to blame, something to point at, anything that allows them to avoid taking responsibility. But the truth follows them no matter how far they try to run from it, because it lives within their own actions and choices. They remember you not always openly, but in quiet moments when everything slows down and reality becomes impossible to ignore. They see what you have become, and it forces them to confront what they chose to destroy instead of appreciate. There is a weight that comes with that realization, a heaviness that cannot be escaped because it is rooted in regret. They try to justify what they did to make it make sense in their minds, but deep down they know truth, and that truth is something they have to carry because it cannot be undone or erased. Meanwhile, you have moved beyond that chapter, completely stepping into a life they never imagined you would reach. You are building something now, not just externally, but internally, something stable, something real, and something that cannot be taken away. Your confidence no longer depends on who stands beside you because you have learned how to stand on your own. The validation you once searched for now comes from within, and it reflects in everything you do. People notice it, not because you seek attention, but because your presence speaks. Without effort, there is a calm strength in you, a certainty that cannot be shaken by opinions or temporary situations you have. Become selective with your energy, careful with your trust, and intentional with your path. The lessons you learned were not wasted. They became the foundation of a mindset that protects your peace. You no longer entertain confusion or inconsistency because you recognize it instantly and choose distance over disturbance. What once drained you now has no access to you, because you have raised your standards beyond what they can reach, and as you continue to grow, something even more powerful begins to unfold within you. You start to understand your purpose on a deeper level, not just as a concept, but as something you live. Every day it shows in your actions, your decisions, and the way you move through challenges without losing yourself. You are no longer reacting to life, you are creating it, shaping it, and directing it with intention. The obstacles that once felt overwhelming now feel like steps guiding you towards something greater. You trust the process, even when things are not clear, because you have seen how everything aligns in the end. There is a sense of direction within you that does not depend on external confirmation. It comes from knowing, and that knowing gives you a kind of peace that cannot be disturbed by outside noise. You realize that everything you went through was necessary to prepare you for this level of awareness. Without those experiences, you would not see things the way you do now, and you would not move the way you move now. And just when you fully step into this version of yourself, something final becomes clear. Your story was never about proving anything to them. It was about discovering everything within you. They played their role, and now that role is finished because your path no longer intersects with theirs. You are not rising because they fell. You are rising because you chose growth over bitterness and truth over illusion. The power you carry now is not loud or forced. It is quiet, steady, and undeniable. It comes from everything you survived, everything you learned, and everything you refused to become. You are no longer defined by what happened to you, but by how you transformed through it. The future ahead of you is not limited by your past, because you have rewritten the direction of your life. What once felt like an ending was actually a beginning, one that led you to a version of yourself you were always meant to become. And now, as you move forward, there is nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase, and nothing left to fear. Only growth, only purpose, and a path that is fully yours to walk.